Have you ever just looked at a world map and wondered, why? Why did history turn out so differently on different continents? Why did some societies end up with huge empires and metal tools, while others didn't? Well, today we're going to dive deep into Jared Diamond's incredible book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, and break down his answer to one of the biggest questions in all of human history.
The whole journey of this book doesn't start in some fancy university library. Nope. It starts on a beach in New Guinea way back in 1972. It all kicks off with a simple but absolutely profound question from a local politician named Yali. And there it is. That's the question that drives everything. Now, when Yali says cargo, he's not just talking about, stuff. He means everything. The steel axes, the soft drinks, the medicines, the whole shebang. He was looking at this massive, lopsided difference in wealth and power and just asking, why? It's a question about the very shape of our world today. Okay, so for centuries, the go-to answer for these kinds of differences was, frankly, just racism. The ugly idea that some groups of people are just born smarter or more creative than others. Diamond tackles this right at the start, and he basically says, look, that explanation is not only disgusting, it is completely scientifically wrong. In fact, Diamond just completely flips that whole racist argument on its head. He says, if you really want to talk about natural selection, think about it. Life in a traditional New Guinean society is incredibly demanding. You need a massive mental map of your environment. You have to navigate complex tribal politics just to stay alive. That life probably selected for higher intelligence. Compare that to a dense European city a few hundred years ago. What does survival often come down to? Honestly? Dumb luck. The luck of your body chemistry and whether you happen to have the right genes to survive the next plague. So if it's not about the people, then what is it about? Well, Diamond's answer unfolds in four absolutely critical parts, what he calls the geographic lottery, then the power of the plow, the animal advantage, and finally, how all that comes together to create history's blueprint. Let's break it down.
All right, this is the absolute core of the whole book. The idea is that geography is basically destiny, that the fates of different societies weren't decided by how smart or capable they were, but by the raw materials their environment just happened to give them. It was a giant lottery, and some continents, well, they got way luckier than others.
To really get this lottery idea, we have to rewind the clock. Way back. We're talking 13,000 years ago, right at the end of the last ice age. At that moment, everyone, everywhere on the planet was a hunter-gatherer. Nobody had a big head start. For that one moment in time, the playing field was basically level.
So what happened? The agricultural revolution. And this is just wild. Out of more than 200,000 wild plant species out there, only a tiny handful were ever suitable for farming. In fact, think about this. Our entire global food system today really depends on just a dozen key plants. And the ancestors of those plants, like wheat, barley, and rice, they weren't spread out evenly. Eurasia just happened to be where most of them grew wild. They won the plant lottery. Winning that lottery wasn't a small thing. It was everything. It was the spark that started a chain reaction that would completely reshape human society. Getting access to those powerhouse crops changed the whole trajectory of history. Just try to wrap your head around this number. With farming, you can feed anywhere from 10 to 100 times more people on the same piece of land. That's not a small bump. That is a population explosion. And more people means more brains to invent things, bigger armies, and just bigger, more complex societies.
And that's when this incredible feedback loop kicks in. See, once you have extra food, not everyone has to spend their day farming. You get specialists, you get full-time soldiers, you get bureaucrats who can organize huge projects, you get inventors who can create new tools, and scribes who can write everything down. And all of that, it leads directly to the guns, germs, and steel of the title. But wait, the plant lottery was only half the story. The other, maybe even more important half, was about animals. And this is where Eurasia's luck just becomes almost unfair. To understand why, we need to talk about something Diamond calls the Anna Karenina principle.
You know that famous first line from the novel, all happy families are alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. Well, Diamond says the same thing is true for domesticating animals. For an animal to be a good candidate, it has to check all the boxes. It needs the right diet, a calm temperament, it has to be willing to breed in captivity, it needs to be perfect. If it fails on just one of those things, it's a no-go. It's why we ride horses, but not zebras. Zebras are just too mean. And the result of this principle? Just look at this breakdown. It's staggering. Eurasia started with the most candidates for big farm animals and ended up with 13 of them. We're talking cows, pigs, sheep, goats, horses, the big ones. The Americas? They got one, the llama. Sub-Saharan Africa and Australia? They got zero. Nothing. This wasn't a failure of the people there. The raw materials simply didn't exist. And having those animals was a total game changer. I mean, they gave you food, clothes, fertilizer, and muscle to pull a plow. Horses completely changed warfare. But the single most powerful and devastating weapon they provided was a complete accident: germs. The worst diseases in human history, smallpox, measles, the flu, they all started as diseases in our farm animals. Okay, so let's put all the pieces together. Let's trace this blueprint of history and finally give a real answer to Yali's question. We've seen all the ingredients. Now let's see how the cake was baked. It really all started with a lucky hand. Eurasia's unique geography and its incredible biodiversity just gave the people living there a massive head start. They had the best plants and the best animals to work with right from the beginning. And that head start in farming was the first domino to fall. That led straight to bigger populations, denser societies, and more specialization. Those societies then developed writing, metalworking, and complex governments. And because they lived crammed together with their animals, they also developed a whole host of nasty diseases that they, over centuries, built up some immunity to. So here's the bottom line. When Europeans showed up in the Americas, they didn't just win because their swords were sharper. They won with guns that were the product of a long history of specialized technology. They won with germs that were bred over thousands of years of living with livestock. They won with steel and political organization that were all funded by superproductive farms. It wasn't biology, it was geography. And that leaves us with one last, really powerful question to think about. If the huge inequalities we see in the world today have their deepest roots not in people, but in the places they lived, what does that mean for us now? It suggests that understanding these deep currents of history isn't just an academic exercise. It's the first step to building a future where our lives aren't just decided by a lottery that was drawn thousands of years ago.